Welcome to Ireland Artcast, uncovering the creative industry with me, Olivia Savage, as your host. Here we talk about all things arts, and each week I'll be joined by inspiring minds creatives to discuss creative careers, as well as burning topics in the art world today, to keep that creative mind of yours in action. Welcome to another episode of Ireland Artcast. For those who don't know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so today's episode focuses on art and health. This pairing is, in my opinion and experience, a hugely significant one and presents such a broad scope for discussion that we address quite often on this show in some shape or form. Today we're going to look at art therapy and how it recognises the importance of art and health. I'm joined by two art therapists today, Fern Callister from Teapot Trust.
Hi.
And Emily Harrison from I'll Listen.
Hi.
So firstly, Fern, can you tell us a bit about Teapot Trust, the charity that you're working for?
Yeah, sure. So Teapot Trust exists to support children who are experiencing hospitalisation or chronic health conditions. So I work on the Isle of Man in the CAMHS unit, so that's specifically supporting children who are needing support with their mental health.
Oh, amazing. And Emily, can you give us a brief summary of I'll Listen?
Yeah, so I'll Listen really was set up in order to try to address the stigma that surrounds mental health and talking about mental health, and it aims at sort of early intervention, so working with young people really, and trying to, like I say, break the stigma around talking about mental health and recognising the importance of looking after your mental health across ages, really. So we do a lot of work in schools and also in workplace as well around sort of stress management in particular.
Mm-hmm. Wow, both amazing charities. So art therapy has been a long operating therapeutic practice, but still is one that is gaining recognition from the public for its mental health benefits. A quick history lesson for our listeners. Art therapy was first used in America in 1915 with children in schools and psychiatric institutes. The term art therapy, however, wasn't coined until 1942 by British artist Adrian Hill, who, during his recovery from tuberculosis, discovered therapeutic techniques from drawing and painting. Now, today in the UK, we have the British Association of Art Therapists that establishes art therapy and works to provide information about it, where it's available, and careers in the field. I personally am a big advocate for the power that art can have on someone's mental health. I'm constantly learning about myself and growing as a person along with the growth of my art practice, not to mention that my practice is based on therapeutic techniques and all that kind of thing. It helps me with my anxiety and stress by allowing me to feel a sense of escaping from the real world by immersing myself in making, as well as being aware that through the process of understanding who I am as an artist, I'm able to learn more about myself as a person, which I always think is a really special thing that art can do that. But anyway, enough with my artist statement. Let's jump into the discussion. Hi, welcome to you both again. Thank you for joining me today. So a lot of our listeners have probably heard of art therapy before, but unless they've looked into a career in it or received it directly, they likely don't know the sort of ins and outs of what art therapy is actually about. And considering the description from the British Association of Art Therapists that outlines the use of art not as a diagnostic tool, but as a medium to address emotional issues, Fern, how would you explain the nature of art therapy?
It's a really good question, because art therapy is all about the process rather than the finished piece of art. I think traditionally at school, even we're taught from a young age to create something to be viewed or to be seen or to be put on a wall, whereas art therapy really values the process and the time that's taken to create something. So it's kind of, as a result, you've got art actually that represents an experience and kind of, in a way, represents what's going on emotionally as well for that person, and can even draw upon experiences that have happened in the past that are still kind of being figured out and processed in the current moment. So
yeah, that's so interesting. I think I really like as well the way that they've used the way to describe it as not a tool but a medium, as a way of sort of realizing emotional issues, as you say. And Emily, for example, people might think that art therapy means you go and you draw a picture and then a therapist can go, this is what's going on.
Yes, yeah.
But can you describe how that's not the case?
Yeah, so it's really about kind of the individual's process, and it's about kind of really exploring art materials and art medium and creative medium as a way of exploring yourself, what's going on for you at the moment, really just kind of enjoying the process, you know, like you were saying about your kind of art process. It's really immersing yourself in the process of making, and you know, while there will be often some reflection on what's kind of created and what's displayed, it's really about, you know, the process as a whole. It's not about kind of diagnosing or, you know, telling someone what's wrong with them by looking at an image. It's about exploring together what meaning there might be in what's created. And it's just as important kind of developing a story over time as well. You know, it's not one single piece. It's about that kind of emerging process and emerging story.
So it's like taking on an art project in a way, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like, do they use like different mediums and that kind of thing?
Yeah. So we would tend to kind of provide, you know, a wide range of medium, really, from drawing, painting, clay, collage. You know, it's really as broad as you know each individual wants to be. You know, and it's about, you know, the art therapist kind of facilitates that environment, this kind of safe space for somebody to really spend that time exploring themselves.
That's such an interesting thing. And then with that in mind, like, Fern, people can think that it's like a fun sort of light-hearted therapy. What do you think of those kind of comments?
So that's an interesting comment. I think Emily and I have had some discussion around that today, because obviously with any kind of therapy there is, you know, an element of commitment to working on yourself, you know, which can be fun at times, yes, but also there's a reason why you've come to this point to experience art therapy, and that is, you know, can be quite a difficult process for some people. But I think the difference with art therapy is that because it is so kind of holistic and kind of uses a lot of play within its kind of process, it can be a lot more of an accessible and easier way to access those difficult feelings or difficult experiences as a result of using art in that way. Yeah.
I suppose with that you must create such a unique kind of relationship with your patients. Is that the right word?
So therapeutic relationship, and within art therapy there's 3 relationships going on in an art therapy session. So you would have the relationship that we would have with the client, the relationship that you'd have with the artwork as well. So it's kind of like a triangulation that happens within the therapy sessions as a result, because the artwork would inform kind of what's going on between client and therapist, and then the client and therapist would obviously kind of look at what's going on within the art. So it kind of makes it a bit more alternative to maybe more traditional talking therapy.
It's such a unique way of sort of exploring someone's emotions. I mean, like I said, I always do it through my own artwork, and like I feel like you realise things through your art that you could never do in other ways. Like, it really has that unique power. And then with that in mind, because with art therapy it's the pairing of art and psychology, but in terms of someone moving into it, what would you say their background should be? Should they be an artist first or a therapist first? Because, like, for example, when I studied art and psychology in school, and neither one actually, I don't remember it mentioning art therapy. I kind of discovered it through the development of my practice. So, Emily, what's your opinion on that? Like, which comes first?
Well, I guess either way, to be honest. It's, you know, I wouldn't say there's a kind of prescriptive way to come to the point. I think that art therapists have often come from quite varied backgrounds, but usually the kind of defining factor is the interest and passion for art. You know, that is kind of at the core of art therapy. You know, that you kind of think creatively, and you know, it kind of informs just how you think about things and who you are, doesn't it? So I think, you know, obviously having a kind of a passion and having your own art practice is definitely really important.
So do you both have your own art practices then?
Try to.
Yeah.
Definitely try to sort of practice what we preach, I think.
I think that's really important to kind of, as an art therapist, to kind of, see what it's like to fail at your own art making and, and experience the disappointment that sometimes you can have in your own art making, and the frustration and in that. Because, but also the exciting part of seeing things emerge and seeing things kind of change and kind of grow and kind of become shape and form and some have symbolic value within your art. So I think if you're kind of encouraging other people to have that experience, you've also got to maybe have your own experience of that yourself, really.
Be able to understand, I suppose, not only how art can help your mental health, but also how art can present issues within that, because I mean, nothing can create frustration for me like my own art practice. Like it definitely works both ways. Like we talk about this on the show, as I say, and often it's in a sense of like creativity is amazing because you're so passionate about it, and when you find that thing, but at the same time that can present stress, having that personal connection. So do you find it can have both effects?
Yeah, definitely. It's it is a real kind of journey and a process, and it can be quite a roller coaster, can't it, sometimes? But I think it's quite a safe way to kind of explore those sorts of things, you know, and I think that's what a lot of people that come to art therapy find, is that it is an easier, more accessible and safer way to explore the kind of frustrations and anxieties and things that you experience generally throughout life. It's quite a good way to explore that, really, and develop kind of coping strategies for that. It's a really great way to think about that.
I suppose in a way you're kind of presenting a coping strategy before you even get into discussing potentially what, or realizing what any issues that are there, because you're kind of going, okay, here's a method first, here's something that's going to make you feel calm, and then with that in mind, what do you think that art therapy can offer over other forms of talking therapy?
I think it's another language, really, art making. It captures something that sometimes, you can't put into words. Colours, shape, form, symbols, kind of, that has a value to each individual person. And, sometimes you just can't capture that. Like, you can't really describe a sunset, but, you could probably paint a sunset in a way and capture it in a different way over maybe you could use with words. And it's the same for feelings. There's some feelings that you actually can't maybe find the right words for, even put into words. So that words only account for a certain capture a certain experience of what it's like to be human. So art making really adds a completely different layer to that. So I think that's why it makes it different to more traditional talking therapies.
Yeah, and I think it's about the whole person, isn't it? Because it really interacts with body and mind, and it demands the use of all your senses and your whole self in that way, So I think that's another way that it's different as well. You can kind of access the unconscious as well, more. Definitely. That, things come up that you're kind of not even necessarily consciously aware of, or like you say, able to put into words.
That's so interesting as well, because I suppose like with talking therapies as a very broad scope, but you're asked questions first and you're kind of trying to find answers, but I suppose with art that completely takes off the pressure and you can just sort of do instead. So there is definitely a common sort of assumption, I think, that art therapy is very much for kids, but I mean, I know, having read into it especially for this podcast, that that's not the case. But can you explain that a little more as to how art therapy can benefit adults as well?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously it's quite a natural way for children and young people to express themselves. They access that really quite readily. But for adults, it can be, art and creativity is something that you often leave behind in childhood. You leave school and it's something that people kind of think, oh, I can't do that, I'm no good at that. But actually, going to art therapy is a way to kind of be much more playful and really open yourself up to, kind of exploring yourself through the eyes of a child and just being a bit freer. You know, I think it really helps.
Yeah, I often find, like, so for example, as an adult, you know, if you mix the colour blue and yellow, you're going to get the colour green. So we know that as an adult brain. Children don't really know that, so that's why it's such a playful way. But I think as adults, because we assume we know everything, we kind of lose the ability to maybe play in that way and kind of maybe see what colours happen if they kind of bleed together or mix together in a way that, you know, kind of lose that kind of that real playfulness and discovery and kind of, you know, of kind of seeing how things move together and seeing if what comes up. I often find that there's a lot of more work in working with adults than children, because you've got to almost kind of get past those trauma blocks of you know, what that person's previous experience has been like of making art, which sometimes I find mostly relates to school and having negative experience of making art within school. So I often find that you almost have to kind of really understand that and unpick all that before you can really, you know, that person can feel confident again and kind of regain that self-esteem in their art making.
So do you find that you get people then who are already artists, or is it usually a very new thing that you're sort of both exploring together what their practice is?
Well, it's a combination, and I think it's something that people often think that it is a therapy for people who are good at art. You know, people come with that that kind of expectation that you know, and often people will come in and say, well, I can't draw, so, you know, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. So it's about, you know, like Fern said, you know, it's kind of unpicking that and where the blocks come from and really trying to encourage that, just that process of playing again and kind of starting from scratch and just exploring what happens when, you know, when you hold a pencil, when you know, you shape a piece of clay, you know, and just kind of building up that confidence. You know, and it really isn't about what it looks like, you know, and kind of trying to break down that barrier of thinking that they've got to create something that's going to look amazing on the wall or that, you know, they're going to be really proud of. It's just really about enjoying the materials and enjoying the process.
It's so interesting that the way that you word it, because it sounds like really it's through a process of learning about art, really, like you're learning about what art is, what an art practice is, all that kind of thing, which is such a good take on it, because, you know, when you're in school, when you're learning, you are learning about art, and it's a process of hitting tick boxes, I suppose, about what you should and shouldn't know. But this is really learning about art in a way of how you fall into that sort of practice. Is there like talking involved in it? Do you get to know them on a talking basis? Do you talk about their work? How does that sort of
I think it all depends on the person and the type of relationship that you have with that person. Some art therapy sessions can be completely non-verbal, and it's all about just seeing what happens in what happens with the images. The images kind of, you know, hold that and capture that, really. Whereas some art therapy sessions can be about, you know, just talking about art rather than making art. So talking about, you know, colours, or kind of talking about what it's like to kind of, you know, visualizations and visualize symbols and visualize maybe kind of art that kind of comes to mind rather than actually creating it. But even talking about it is, you know, that's still connecting to art, you know, in some way. It doesn't have to be necessarily creating. You're still having you're still thinking about being creative in a way.
That's so interesting to have an entirely non-verbal session in therapy. Like, I had no idea that art therapy could sort of take that route, but I suppose that's so good for people who feel scared about therapy, because there's such a heavy pressure on talking. Do you find you get lots of people like that who are sort of actively like wouldn't benefit from talking therapy?
Yeah, absolutely, and it does, I mean, it does help people to develop the relationship, I guess, that, you know, they might be able to work towards kind of externalizing things verbally eventually, with that not being the most important thing. It definitely does take the pressure off people. I think it is really important for some people, you know, because it can be quite daunting to kind of sit there and be expected just to kind of talk things through, and not everybody has access to the vocabulary to talk about how they feel or what they think, you know. It can be really challenging. So I think, yeah, that is a really important part of the art therapy process, is that you can have an interaction with somebody and you can have, you know, a kind of a back and to conversation without words, you know. Even
that's really nice. So do you guys ever make work as well? Is that something that happens, or are you very much like a backseat sort of?
Again, I think it depends on the person. I definitely have have made artwork alongside people before, and I think sometimes, you know, that might be necessary to help people to just begin with the process, because actually, you know, a blank piece of paper can be quite a scary, daunting thing as well for some people. So, you know, definitely that has been important for some people. And like I say, often you know, it can be a two-way conversation and a way to build up somebody's confidence in interacting with another person, and it very much depends on the individual. And I think that is the important thing about art therapy, is that it's an extremely individual process. You know, everybody will come and kind of approach it differently, and you'll approach it differently with each person that comes. You know, it's kind of definitely very much tailored to the individual and led by them.
I suppose it's a super, like, I found in my experience of making, that it can be quite a retrospective process. Like, often I'll start making something and I'll sit there and go, I have no idea where this is going. Like, I don't know where I'm going to end up with this piece of work. I just started with a ball of clay. I don't know. And then it's at the end, when you look back on it, maybe even like you've left it for a month and then you've gone back to it, and then suddenly you look at it and you're like, that's what it was the whole time, you know? Like, that must be something that you get quite a lot with people who they make, and then it's not till they look back that I suppose you both kind of go, that's what this is about then, you know?
It's like, I guess it's that unconscious process, you know, your unconscious knows really what it needs to communicate and what it needs to say, and sometimes the thinking brain just needs to kind of catch up with that to really kind of recognise actually what's coming through from the unconscious, what's being worked through and what's being expressed. And having that break and then coming back to it really helps you kind of, you know, look at back at that thing with your thinking mind, to really kind of understand maybe what that form is, or what is being created or expressed in that way.
That's why it's really good to have that kind of tangible thing that's been created to look back on and enable that reflection process, you know. And that's what we would often keep all the artwork together and kind of bring it out every now and then to kind of review it and see if there's any kind of themes that have come up, and like you say, anything that you kind of look back on now and you kind of recognise that, or that you've got an image that you kind of go away and think about and reflect on, you know, weeks after you've been in that session.
And that final image can really stay with someone. The fact that they've gone to a session, created something and left that image there in the therapy session with the therapist who's taking care of it, they've gone away with that image in their mind, can really stick with someone, and it kind of allows time to really process maybe what's come up as a result of creating that thing. It might have some kind of symbolic value, or kind of link into an experience, or kind of some kind of feeling. So leaving it behind is quite a powerful thing, and then returning to it in the next session and maybe seeing it with different eyes after you've had a chance to really process it and try to understand it.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose memory can be such a powerful thing in that sense, because it's somewhere in your brain that has formulated what's come out, whether that's sculptural, painterly or anything like that, and then once you've then left that, it's your brain that's then left with something that's become physical, which is a really interesting, I think, way of thinking about things and realising things about yourself. It's like, it's here, then it's in front of you, then it's back here again without that visual. So what kind of people do you often find benefit from art therapy the most?
Oh, it's very broad, I would say, really. You know, it can really help a wide range of people. It's kind of really gaining ground in kind of trauma work. You know, it can be really effective with trauma work, kind of dealing with imagery and the senses and all of that kind of thing. It's really important and really powerful, and it's, you know, it's incredibly helpful for people with anxiety and depression, that kind of thing. And kind of chronic illness, you know, pain. It's used a lot for that as well.
I think that's the thing. We've all got access to art making, so everyone can really benefit from. You know, we're all creative beings. We're all here. You know, we can all kind of create in some kind of shape or form. So, you know, so in any way, anyone can really benefit from art making and art therapy as a result. And
I think as well, something that art therapy can do is really put the nature of therapy in a different light, because I think often, you know, as we mentioned earlier, talking therapy you can feel quite a bit of pressure from going into it, and I think it can put people off because it makes them think that they've got to have something serious, you know, really ready to come and talk with, and that can be such an intimidating thing. But I guess, and what, you know, we hope to do with this episode as well, is to normalise conversations about how beneficial therapy can be without that having to be negative. And as well, I mean, people know more about art therapy now, but it's still often referred to as a relatively new practice, even though, you know, it's been going on, as we say, first coined in 1942. Now, in today, when we're in a COVID world where people are turning to creativity a lot more, why do you think art therapy is now really gaining the awareness that it deserves?
I think before COVID, we would kind of, you know, look to go somewhere or do something to kind of seek enjoyment. And I think, you know, with COVID, everyone can't go anywhere. Everyone's staying inside. Everyone's kind of, you know, within their own space. So it's kind of art making has always been there for everybody to do. So I think art, you know, we all know art has real scientific effects of calming the nervous system, kind of releasing dopamine, a feel-good chemical in your brain to kind of help you relax. So I think the benefits of making art have been reached out for a lot more recently as a result of, you know, people being, you know, having to maybe take care of their mental health maybe a little more than what they've previously had to pay attention to. So
Have you guys found that you've had more time to make your own work?
Well, I went through a really interesting sort of process really during lockdown. Obviously, we were kind of working from home and also kind of homeschooling and all that kind of stuff that a lot of people have really struggled with. You know, it's quite a stressful thing. So I kind of really tried to make an effort to kind of look after my own self-care, and part of that was to return to some sort of regular art practice that, you know, I don't always kind of make time for, don't always prioritise. So it was part of, you know, prioritising that again. And I think, you know, I kind of developed this 10 minutes every day that I would spend on doing some form of creating, and I kind of started creating mandalas. So I was doing a mandala a day, and I think that for me that was quite powerful, because it really helped me to kind of have that just 10 minutes. It's easy to find 10 minutes on your own, you know, to just really focus on being in the moment and just kind of just enjoying that moment, being really mindful, just spending that 10 minutes just really looking after me, just focusing on myself, and you know, kind of, so that was, you know, it was really helpful actually during that time we were in lockdown. You know, I think that was really important, and I think that's been a process that a lot of people have kind of gone through. You know, kind of stuck at home, trying to find ways to cope with what's going on.
Yeah. What about you, Fern? Have you found more time?
I have, yeah. So where I live, I kind of was really trying to observe, you know, spring and all the change and the things that were happening around in my garden and outside around me. So I kind of paid attention to all the flowers that are popping up, and I actually made a kind of a little mini wildflower field guide, actually, with all the flowers that I was noticing. So each page had like a different flower that I knew, and just really encouraged me to kind of be observant with, you know, the act of art making really encouraged me to be observant with what's going on around me, and just really pay attention to, you know, to being mindful and being present, rather than thinking about when's this lockdown going to end, how long are we going to be here, you know, all that uncertainty and that anxiety. You know, actually it made me really think about connecting to the present moment, and actually I really enjoyed that. You know, found some real joy in just kind of just seeing through the eye, you know, my own eyes of what's going on in my garden and the birds and things like that.
That's so interesting, because I found the exact same thing with art. I think because, as you say, COVID presented so much uncertainty, and I don't know about you guys, but I find that really stressful. You know, I don't like not knowing what's going to happen even in the next month. I mean, at one point, and art really was that thing that you could go to and sort of like celebrate uncertainty, because you don't know what's going to come of an artwork, so you can really sort of harness it in that making and take it as a positive rather than a negative thing,
and get comfortable with that feeling, being with that feeling, and it's just really grounding as well, isn't it? It just kind of really helps you to bring you back to the here and now, and kind of, it's something that you can control, and you can you know, you've got power over, you can do something, feel like you're achieving something, and
and you've got you're left with a physical object as well as a result. So, you know, you're left with something to maybe, you know, when it's completed, to bring you back to that moment and link you into that point, you know, that place of mindfulness and being still and being comfortable, and just being, you know, reminiscing on that act of art making. You're left with something that represents that as well.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it is entirely, whilst, you know, we talk about making art, you are disconnecting yourself from reality for a second and sort of feeling that, you know, being able to drop the stress of what's going on and just focus on your artwork. But at the same time, your artwork is entirely a harness of everything that's happening in that moment and how that's reflecting on how you're feeling. I suppose that's kind of is that sort of like the approach that you guys take? Like it's a representation of absolutely everything that's happening now without you even realizing it.
Absolutely. You've made it, so it's part of you. It's come from, you know, it represents so many aspects of yourself in that one image. You know, it's kind of captured a part of, you know, who you are in a way, in a form that you can actually touch and hold and move and change and manipulate and yeah. So it's quite, you know, it's quite something quite special really as a result of that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And just as my last question to round things off for today for our listeners, what advice can you guys give to anyone who is artist, not yet an artist, who could benefit from getting creative as a way to sort of channel any mental health or emotional issues that they're experiencing?
I think it's just, you know, I think with art making, if you've not used art making before, you know, it's just a process of discovery. You know, just seeing what material calls to you. You know, is it a pen or a paintbrush, or is it clay? Is it collage? Is it colour? You know, it's just taking something that, you know, there's a reason why it's attracted you. So use that and just enjoy the process, play with it, see how it moves, see where it takes you. It might be something small where it's literally just matching up different colours, or it might be something, you know, a lot bigger, like a canvas or something like that. But you know, picking up a paintbrush or picking up an art material of some sort is an act of kind of, you know, just carving out time for you in quite an unstable and uncertain kind of time of change, really. So my advice would be just give it a go and just have confidence, and you know, and it doesn't have to, you know, it doesn't, like Emily said, it doesn't have to go on a wall. You know, it doesn't have to kind of be shown anywhere. It's just the act of carving time out of your busy day to just look after yourself.
That's a lovely way to end today's show. So thank you both so much for coming on.
Thank you.
No worries. A quick note before we head off for another day: if you're listening to this, then you've lasted through a whole episode, which I'm going to guess means that you enjoyed the show, which is amazing. In order to help Island Artcast reach out to more creatives, we really need your help, so please remember to rate and review the shows you've listened to and enjoyed. Even if you didn't enjoy them, you can still rate us. If you're an avid Island Artcast listener, subscribe or follow the show on your podcast platform. These things only take 2 seconds out of your day to do, but mean the absolute world to the show, so please show us your support. Other than that, remember to keep up to date with all the latest Arts Council news on our website, iomarts.com, and by following us on social media. Just search Isle of Man Arts Council on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Thanks again to Fern and Emily for joining me today, and to all our listeners out there. See you next episode.